Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scot, and joining me tonight, well, I wouldn't say he's the sparrow to my umbrella, but he is an awfully nice fella. It's Kimber. How you doing tonight, Kimber?
Hey, Scott, I'm glad to be here again.
Yeah, I think last time you guest appeared here was back in 2020.
I think that's about right by my timestamps.
Right. I mean, obviously the last couple of years have all gotten fuzzy for most of us, especially when you think back to 2020, which is feels like it was 20 years ago. But that was the podcast we did late in the year when we covered the fourth season of The Crown as well as The Queen's Gambit. So we did one of those combo cast kind of things. Mm-hmm. But more pertinent to what we're talking about tonight, earlier that year, I think that we had a little streak on the STVD podcast here. It was we're doing all these mega super team relating podcasts. There was one I did covering the 2 seasons of Doom Patrol with Brian, and a few weeks later there was one covering the first 1.5 seasons of The Boys. But right in between them, you and I got together. We covered the first 2 seasons of The Umbrella Academy, and obviously, that is why we've brought you back. I thought it would be a good idea to have you, make like Klaus and return from the STV dead to co-host, about those crazy Umbrella Academy kids again.
Yeah, and, going with, what is time and how long it's been, it's very appropriate to be talking about the Umbrella Academy when, they just jump through time all the time. So...
Yeah. And I also like the idea of things, in a weird way, we're kind of doing an inverse of what we did before. Last time, we crammed 2 seasons into 1 podcast. This time, we're going to split 1 season into 2 podcasts. Science. No. Now, I don't know. You know what? I'd like to lie to the audience and say, I don't know about you, but I actually know you did go 1 episode ahead, so you're going to have to shut up later on. But speaking for myself only, apparently, I made sure not to watch beyond the 5th episode. I mean, Netflix tried to make me jump the gun, because, they try to skip to that, so they don't give you a chance to watch those credits. They go right to it. So I saw, the first 3 seconds of the 6th episode, and I went, no, stop. I saw a monkey. Stop. So, I mean, I know you did watch 1 more episode, so we'll take that into account later on. But the reason why is because I thought any theorizing or speculation that we might do, obviously we may be proven way wrong by the time we get back together a week from now. And it's also very possible, I would even say likely, that listeners, they probably will have binged the entire series when they're listening to the podcast, which means they can have the fun of laughing mockingly at us for anything that we get totally wrong. You idiots, we're smarter than you. Trust me, that's what I do to everyone else. And I was also thinking I could make a comment about the whole binge model versus weekly model, but number one, I feel like I might have blathered on about that in another podcast already. And number 2, we can wait till our next podcast anyway, or to make it in 1 sentence for a change. I think it works for some things. It doesn't for other things. I think it's better for shows that are already established and are major events, like a Stranger Things, for example. It does not hurt a show like that. Although it probably still would have been better if it had been a weekly thing, because you build interest, you build conversations, you cultivate the pop culture zeitgeist to last for so much longer. It just becomes more embedded into people's consciousness, as opposed to, oh, here it is, and now it's gone, and then we don't talk about it anymore. I think that actually hurt a show for like say Ozark, kind of like it came and then then it went, and it hurts new shows, I think. I mean, yes, forever one can point to something like Squid Game, which was a global phenomenon, but a show like what was it called earlier? In fact, I'm even forgetting what it was called. Was it Article 87 or Archive 87? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I didn't watch that one. Sorry.
It's really, really good. And it was a kind of thing, it had a lot of great horror elements that were very reminiscent of the guy who'd done stuff like Midnight Mass and those kind of things. It was kind of a cross of like had a Rosemary's Baby meets The Shining meets God knows what else, and it had a nice New York feel to certain parts of it. The business that you and I used to both be in. There were little things about it that probably would have appealed to us because they talk about archiving and it's trying to restore footage and stuff like that. But it just got dumped all at once. It never got to build up that kind of anticipated interest, and as a result, did not get renewed. And I think if it was a weekly show, that would have gotten renewed because it ended on a cliffhanger. So we're screwed. Anyway. I guess I didn't make a comment about it after all. All right. All right, enough of that. We're here to talk about The Umbrella Academy, Season 3. Let's kick it off with the first episode, the episode that was titled Meet the Family. Now, Kimber, before I even get into something, let me throw a question at you right off the bat. While I'm sure you certainly didn't go back and rewatch the original pilot of the show, because I don't think anyone would have done that. Do you recall when the show first started? Did they begin the Umbrella Academy back in Season 1, Episode 1, with a little origin story of the entire Umbrella Academy? I feel like they might have done that. It seems really familiar to me.
Yeah, it was very similar in the Season 3 where they kind of walked through. It was a little more extended with Reginald going around the world adopting the babies, and then that had the same exact shot of the women,
the nannies, and
the nannies, and even the way he walked up to the door and they came in on both sides, sort of in formation.
Right.
That was almost an exact recreation of that they used for the origin of the Sparrow Academy in Season 3.
Yeah, I always remembered it had that slight almost like Barry Sonnenfeld kind of quality, anyone who doesn't know that is think like the Addams Family, that kind of stuff, and where everything is very beautifully symmetrical and whatever. So
and it had that the English gentleman's sort of voiceover, sort of explaining what happened, and
and I think the gag that they're doing here. I mean, I don't think I know the gag is. If you're watching it and you initially think, oh, they're showing this again, but then you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is the Sparrow Academy origin, not the Umbrella Academy origin. And then we kind of get into the episode because we pick up where we left off at the end of Season 2. But let's talk about the first happy-making thing, and has made me decide to change my viewing habits in a month or two from now. Yes, we do kick things off with a showdown between the members of the Umbrella Academy and the Sparrow Academy. But the showdown, initially it seems like, wait a minute, what's happening here? It's a Footloose themed dance-off. And it's not just 30 seconds. They go through, if not the entire song, a huge chunk of it. At least in American Idol's amount worth, because American Idol used to do part of a song, not a full song. Anyway, don't know why I know that. Oh yeah, I know it because he's watching. Obviously, we also discover immediately afterwards this is all a hallucination that Diego is having. That was induced by the mind-warping loogie that was spat at him by one of the more snotty sparrows, whose name is Jamie.
Jamie, yeah.
But I love that intro because it's a reminder, especially because, we haven't seen Umbrella Academy for a little bit of time here, but with COVID and everything else probably delaying productions, whatever. And it's nice to be oh yeah, I forgot how much fun this show can be. And it's, they can get really dark, and when we get to the 5th episode, there's some dark shit in that one. But they can also be really fun and light, and I got enough of a kick out of this that I have pledged online. I'm actually going to get around to finally seeing Footloose because I've never actually seen it in my life.
Yep, saw it in the theater. And it's also become a signature for the show, right? Every season has got the one sort of like signature kickoff scene with a big musical number for a big portion of the cast. So it's not that it's expected. Like, it had been enough years now that I'd sort of forgotten about that.
I had forgotten.
Oh yes, this is what we're doing again. Yeah, this is right. We are definitely back with this family in this show.
Right. I had like a vague memory that there was a song that thing, they kick off with Luther that he's a big fan of, or he puts on or something in the very first season. But if you said what song is it, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it was Aha. Maybe
I think we're alone now.
Oh, okay. I knew it was an '80s thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's always, when in doubt, you go to the '80s. It's just what you do. All right. But of course, after that little hallucination ends, then we get the fight. And, it goes on for a little while. But outside of Vanya pretty much cosmic blasting everybody at the end, the Umbrella Academy, as someone else says later on, they pretty much all get their asses handed to them by the Sparrows.
Yeah, the fight's a really good way to introduce the powers
yes.
of the Sparrows, like a really smart, like really quick shorthand, because we see them at the end very briefly of season 2, and like suddenly, like, who are all these characters? And like, oh, this is what their capabilities are.
Right. And because we're in the same position as the Umbrella Academy, like, we don't know who these people are, other than Ben. Ben's the only established one, obviously. Mm-hmm. But all the other ones, and you wonder, like, what does that cracky faced guy do, or what does that, or what does that girl do? Oh, the spit. Okay, is that her only power? Although it's kind of an interesting power, but I don't know what to make of that one. Yeah. And
what is that?
What's the deal with the cube? The cube.
Christopher.
It was like
Chris.
So wait a minute, is that the cosmic cube? And they just decided to give it more sentience? Anyway, we also learn that this is happening because after Reggie or Reginald met the team back in 1963, he just thought they were a bunch of screw-ups. So when it came time years later for him to buy a bunch of the super babies that were manufactured in 1989, he made sure to skip those and buy 7 others instead. At least that's pretty much the way he tells the story.
Yeah, he did a family reboot.
Yes, exactly. Which, that's what we do with these franchises. We reboot them. That's exactly it. So at that point, we realize, and they start to realize that, there's been a major timeline change here. But unfortunately, when they're on their way out, the one thing that they're looking for and they don't find is that briefcase, the time-traveling briefcase. And we see that this version of Robot Grace has brought it down to the basement. Or I guess what they say later, it's the storage room where they keep all the luggage, but can we just call it the basement? It's the basement. But there's something else in that basement. There's this big, unexplained ball of energy that looks not just powerful, it looks ominous. It looks like it should be in the middle of some sort of weird thing in a Star Trek episode more than when it should be here.
It would be talking in Star Trek, though.
No, that would have to be like, it would have to be like ticking bomb kind of music. So one of the fun things I think they do this season, and they introduce it right after that, they give us a great new setting. And that setting is going to be the Hotel Obsidian. And there's a lot to love about this because they can have a lot of fun with this. They can do any number of winking nods to any number of things that have involved hotels over the years. I caught some of that shining light decor. That didn't get past me. I noticed it.
It's not carpeting this time. It's wallpaper.
It's the wallpaper. I was like, I recognize that. Is a lady going to be coming out of the bathtub now? And just. It's just all the very dry wit of the person running the place and the people who are the odd folks who always seem to be sitting around staring at them, but then not really paying attention to them. It's a great, fun little setting, and like I said, there's a lot you can do with a setting like that. That was so well said. But I got a big kick out of it. And is this the situation where you realize that none of them have money? And they went with the classic. How much for a watch? which takes you back. Like, how many times have we seen that? My first thought was like, it could be like planes, trains, and automobiles, or maybe trading places. Actually, well, at least in planes, trains, they actually were trying to get into a motel. Trading place, he was just trying to get money. I was actually impressed. Like, wow, they actually got 2 rooms for it. Is that how good a watch is it? That's very impressive.
It's a very nice watch.
Because that hotel, It doesn't look like it should be a cheap hotel. So thinking about the Sparrows, they make it clear that Marcus is the clear leader of the Sparrows. And at a certain point, he meets with Vanya. And when they meet, basically it looks like they've struck a deal, especially after she threatens to embarrass him. And I really liked seeing Vanya once again. And we will be changing names and pronouns as we move forward in this podcast. But since we're doing episode by episode, at this point, she is Vanya. But I love, and actually maybe it says a lot more about the character at this point, how assertive she is.
Right. I mean, her arc is gone from being the outcast or the person that never had identified powers in the first episode, all the way to she's maybe not number one, but she's almost like the leader of this team at this point. Like
the people, the Sparrows took her as number one because usually your number one person is the person with the most powerful person. At least that was the way that they do it, because apparently Marcus is like the Superman of the Sparrows, so to speak. And when it turns out she's like, because she had like the lowest number originally, was she like 7 or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they didn't even realize she even had abilities until yesterday. So when Marcus heads back home, he goes down to the basement, and that's when he encounters Grace. And I used the phrase genuflecting because people say that out loud all the time, genuflecting, before that big ball of energy. And at that point, we see a rippling wave kind of goes through the city, which apparently vaporizes a dog at the hotel. And also vaporizes Marcus. I think it might have started when he goes. Does it start when he actually goes to touch it, and then the wave happens? I think, yeah, because it usually has to be instigated by something like that, I've noticed.
Yeah.
So what's kind of fun about that is, okay, we thought this was going to be about how the timeline's gotten screwed up and time has changed, and what are they going to do? Is this just going to be another time travel situation where, okay, then it's like Flashpoint, you got to keep going back and then trying to change something to fix something, and you realize, oh no, there is something, there's a much bigger threat that has happened as a result. We don't know yet what the hell the connection is or what the hell this is, but I like that there's a much bigger, as I once again using the phrase, ticking time bomb in the show than just, oh, they need to correct, time.
Yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see what the payoff is with the mom's obsession with this thing in the basement. She seems to have, as a robot, she's found God somehow and has a connection to this. She's writing runes on the floor, and she seems to be the one sort of like most enamored by this thing. And it unfolds in the first 5 episodes, but I'm really interested to see what the payoff is, like towards the end with her relationship with this thing.
Right. I am equally curious why, because she's, she is a robot, android, whatever you want to call her, but why she would suddenly be imbued with this religiosity. And why she's talking. I mean, it makes for some interesting bits of dialogue throughout these 5 episodes, but I kept scratching my head about it. I was like, but why is she acting that way? I wonder, and I do hope there is some semblance of an explanation for it. I mean, I'll survive if there isn't, but it's curious. It is very curious.
Right. I mean, right from the jump in the first episode, I mean, they're establishing how different things are. The Sparrows have obviously no respect for her. They refer to her just as an android or a robot or something, while Diego is like looking at her like, Mom, like he always is. So just establishing what their relationship is with Reginald, what their relationship is with the mom. You clearly are in a space where you're trying to figure out like how will this all come together or not come together in the different relationships of the characters with each other.
Right, because they definitely established that the Sparrow Academy it's kind of like what the Umbrella Academy was until they lost, I guess probably until Ben passed away, and how that they kind of fell apart from that point on, where this is what, if they had stayed together, they became more of a, almost corporate. They almost went corporate in a sense. They got this, gleaming pretty gym. They're clearly the ones in charge. They don't think much. They think Grace is basically just a Roomba with a face, and they don't. And Reggie's just there just to sign documents, but they don't really, for the most part, they don't seem to pay him any mind or any respect, although that does tend to change from scene to scene, which is a little confusing, but we'll talk about that in a later episode.
Yeah, that unfolds. Yeah, they've got some great branding. They've got like posters and like banners on the front of the mansion, some billboards around the city. Like clearly they're a much different team than the Umbrella Academy was.
Right. Yeah, it's like Dawn of the Seven. Anyway, all right, let's move on to the second episode then. And the second episode, which was titled "World's Biggest Ball of Twine." Now, there's a few significant things about this episode, but first and foremost, this is the episode where I use this without the intended pun, but where we transition from Vanya to Victor. We do see a scene earlier in the episode, which I thought was very fun. Because, of course, this ancient hotel, which has this very Art Deco Gothic look, would have a random entire set of encyclopedias, and we see her flipping through an encyclopedia, and we see them. They're in the encyclopedia. It's the Kennedy Six. Because of them, and which also brings to mind all the plots that were going on back in season 2 with the assassination of Kennedy and everything else. And they see pictures of them. She sees pictures of Sissy, and she goes from there to getting a haircut. And and you realize this is obviously she didn't just suddenly get inspired to do this. This is something that's been building for a while, and this was just like the turning point for her. Because when she gets the haircut, that's also when she's actually made the decision to come out as Victor as opposed to Vanya. And it was really kind of credible the way they handled it, as far as when she's telling. I should stop saying she at this point. As far as when Victor's telling his brothers, and then later on Allison, I thought it was handled very carefully and without trying. And I liked how they balanced it because they didn't lean too heavy into, okay, that's maybe I hate to use the phrase because I know people associate people on the far right using it all the time, but they didn't lean into being like too woke about it, where it would have been a little bit too over the top in that regard, but they also didn't go in the other direction either. You realize that each of these individuals already sees themselves. They know one thing they know about themselves and each other. Like, these are outsiders. They're different, but at the same time, they should be more accepting of something that's of change and something that's different among their own ranks. And that's what they do with Victor, and I just thought there was something really nice about it, and I thought it was very believable because I kept imagining, something similar to this might have actually gone on the set itself, because when Ellen Page became Elliot Page and came back there, I mean, I'm sure conversations happened. So I just really got a kick, not a kick. I just really enjoyed how they handled the whole situation.
Yeah, I thought it was really smart, and. The show just has a lot of snappy dialogue and moves fast. And they even handled this in just like a quick couple lines. Like, oh, you got a haircut. Like, oh, yeah, I'm Victor now. Like, oh, okay. It's like Luther comes in like, oh, what did I miss? It's like, oh, this. Oh, okay, right. And they're just – it's just really quick, dealt with, and like you said, they're dealing with – time travel and beings that are in the shape of cubes or fish in fish bowls like in the previous seasons. Like for them, anything is possible,
right?
And that kind of magical thinking is it's almost like an aspirational kind of way that they present it.
Right. Yeah, and it applies to themselves as well. I mean, when you're number one, he's basically a human head on top of a simian body, essentially. It's But I also like while they do things rather quickly, but they don't go so quickly to not have it at least be a question. Because Luther brings it up again later on, feeling like, oh, shouldn't we do something? Isn't this a bigger deal? Shouldn't? And it's like, of course he's going to be the one to say that.
Yeah,
and
I think it's, and I know you're a fan of like old, like 70s television, 60s television, and like people look to, like the Kirk or her kiss, I'm trying to think, has there been is this a moment in television or whatever we call Netflix where a actor's personal life has caused a script change in a character in a dramatic show? When I think about when I just think about topics as they were brought up, particularly in that period in the late 60s and the 70s on TV, like, is this the first time we've seen this? Certainly not trans actors.
I don't know. I don't recall if it's happened specifically like this as far as someone who has went through this sort of transition. Mm-hmm. The things I would think of that are in the same ballpark, if nothing else, would be like go back, like one of the most famous things, like back in the 90s, the Ellen Show, the sitcom she had, where the whole thing about her being, in real life, the whole exposure of her being gay, and they decided, okay, we're going to make her character on the show gay as well, because if you watch the first couple seasons, she's not. So that's something like that has happened. I always kind of wish that maybe the last season of How I Met Your Mother, they finally said, you know what, we're going to find out that Barney's actually been gay the whole time. Because, it's Neil Patrick Harris.
Right.
He's basically cooler than anyone who's gay or straight, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I mean, just one more thing, not to get off topic, because it's a totally different kind of show. Like, I found this in Schitt's Creek a couple years ago, where that was a universe that was presented where, people were just gay, and everybody in the town, from the idiot mayor to whomever, was just like, oh, okay. Like it was never a conversation point. And not that it wasn't a conversation point in Umbrella Academy, but it was quickly dealt with, accepted, and we moved on to the important things in life, which is that the world might potentially end. This was not the main thrust of it. Wasn't, like you said, like everybody needed to sit down around the table and have like one of their Umbrella Academy like family meetings, and have a big conversation. It was just quickly handled and moved on, and I thought it was really smart writing and hopefully some collaboration among the actors too. Right.
It's probably the most significant one because it actually relates to the performer's life outside of the show.
Right.
But one of the things I'm gonna note about these first 5 episodes is there's a few major, perhaps life-changing revelations that characters deal with that are kind of just like, okay, yeah, fine, and we move on because there's such a bigger thing going on, and and again, we'll get to each one as we get to it, especially one of them, which is we get to much later, which I kept thinking, oh, that he's totally being overshadowed by everything else going on because that's a big deal. But we'll get there. Like I said, I'm going to treat chronological.
It's a show about perspective, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's exactly. When I tell people they should watch Umbrella Academy, that's what I tell them. It's like it's all about perspective, man. Not a forced perspective. Anyway, now we're getting too artsy. All right, so the Sparrows assume that the Umbrella Academy must have captured Marcus, so they snatch Luther because they have learned that he is the number one. But of course, when they grab him, Luther's not the best number one, but it's one of those things where, wait, you start thinking, who would be the good number one on this team? Because, it may, in a different season, Allison, but not this season, I don't think 5 would, 5 maybe, but he's such a little, I'll drop the first dirty word. He's such a little twat at times. I don't know if he'd be the best choice. You want to say Victor now, perhaps, and certainly has the spearhead a number of things, but but as we also get to something else in a later episode, you realize, well, maybe not the right one for the job. So it's interesting that it's Luther still, but Luther's not the smartest of them.
Probably the dumbest hostage in the history of hostages on screen. Yes. Like, he's just loving the muffins and the smoothies and the gym setup, and and it's like he realizes like partway through, he's like, oh, right, like I'm actually being held hostage. I didn't get this until now.
But the key thing about him being captured is it gives us the opportunity to get a better view of the different members of the Sparrow Academy. And, you can kind of just go through, like, looks like Ben really is a dickhead, like they were saying he was. He's a really unlikable character. Sloane really does like Luther's. And then I think and then at this point, at least, I was thinking that Faye, that chick, she might be the most worrisome of the bunch at this point. So I'm thinking, well, she's got some crazy ass powers. Just those ravens alone,
and we'll probably talk about along the way, Luther starting season 1 on the moon. In the comic he's called Moon Boy, and that Sloane's powers over gravity. Right. And I sort of saw this whole thing like, oh, he was living in a gravity-free environment at the beginning of the series, and she has control over gravity, and so is it natural that these two come together? I just don't know whether that was intentional, but I picked up on that.
Oh, also, yeah, especially because later on when they have that conversation, the fact that she actually is fascinated by the fact that he was on the moon. Mm-hmm. By the way, Luther, don't feel so bad. It's only your family that's like that. Anyone else would be like, holy crap, you were on the moon? Dude, we were like, have you seen For All Mankind? It's amazing.
It's another podcast.
Another podcast that'll never happen.
Yeah.
So speaking of, I mentioned before about major life-changing events and things happening to characters. Well, that's what happens next, because Lila shows up. And I got a big kick out of the Lila character in season 2. I really liked her a lot. But, whereas it's only been a few days or whatever for Diego, and for her, it's been well over a decade. She's moved on. She's been with lots and lots of guys, many guys. But the one thing she had to remember Diego by was apparently she had a kid with him, and now he's 12 years old, and now she's dumping him on Diego. So, like I said, that's kind of a major thing. It's like, oh, by the way, you're a dad. Boom, and he's 12. Okay. And for some reason we named him Stan.
Stanley.
Not really sure why. Because she doesn't look like someone who would name a kid Stan. I don't know. But what I liked about that storyline as it moved forward, just say that from the outset, is I like when you give characters a different type of a situation or a major change to deal with, because it gives them the opportunity to explore other portrayal of other feelings and motivations on the screen. That, like, for this, we haven't seen that with Diego. So the fact that he's trying to suddenly be a dad is like, okay, it's interesting for someone who didn't really have much of a dad, clearly have a dad himself, that he's going to have to try to be one to this kid that he literally just met. So it actually makes, there are some fun scenes that happen later on, but we're not up to that
yet. Yeah, and I was going to comment, like, I think Diego has often been my least favorite, just in terms of I don't know, for reasons, but he's always the one that always had the closest bond with the mom, right?
Yeah, yes.
So if anything, he was a little boy striving to have this relationship with a mother and not accepting she was an android, and like all those kinds of things in the earlier seasons, and to see him arise as the season goes on as striving to be like a really good dad, maybe not always good, like, knife throwing and Molotov cocktails and so on, but like, but it's an interesting turn for that character. And I think it made his character, for me, a lot more interesting in season 3.
Interesting. Okay. I actually felt that way about him in season 2. Mm-hmm. Whereas I didn't really, he was probably my least favorite among them in season 1. But I thought the stuff with him in season 2, if I'm recalling correctly, it's where he's basically in an asylum for a chunk of the time. Yeah, and the whole relationship with Lila I thought was kind of a fun thing that season. So that's probably, I think that was the season I was like, oh, I actually kind of like him now. Good for you, Umbrella Academy. Good for you. I'll go back and listen to our podcast.
Yeah.
I bet I said it then too.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of characters I really liked in season 2, I think of Allison. But now Allison, we see that she returns to her home in California, but sadly she discovers that she's no longer a mom. Claire doesn't exist. We have that super creepy, crazy moment where she's already gotten into the house and she thinks she's creeping up on her daughter to say, I love you. And it turns out to be a totally different little girl. And that plays out pretty, I almost wish we had seen, I don't know if, I think we cut away so she never gets the chance to have any sort of explanation with the guy that, would have been her, was he her husband or ex? Boyfriend? I don't remember now.
Husband. She was married because the husband takes custody of of their daughter after she does the rumor thing on her daughter.
That's right. Thank you. See, it's been a while, and plus I'm old.
I think Allison. Again, it'll be interesting to see where she lands this season because her character, more so than they've lost time, they've lost universes, there's a lot of loss in this, but she's lost her daughter and her husband in the original timeline. In the second season in the Dallas, she loses that second husband that she has the relationship or boyfriend. I can't remember whether they get married or not, and then she's in this timeline and she loses that daughter a second time. So she's lost her daughter twice and lost two husbands now or three husbands, I guess, in three different timelines. It's hard to keep track of all the loss. And she goes so dark and she is so broken in so many ways.
Right.
It would be interesting to see how dark that gets for her.
Yeah. I have bullets. I have bullets in the chamber ready to talk about that, but I'm going to wait till that certain key scene.
Yeah,
but she is the one member that has been hit with serious loss compared to anybody else. I mean, what has Luther lost? Nothing.
Nothing.
What has Diego lost? Nothing I can think of. I mean, Lila for a hot minute, Victor has actually there is loss, but also has discovered about himself here.
I think Victor's loss has been a discovery.
Yes,
long term.
And Klaus experienced loss before. So I would say Klaus had that happen in the previous season. That was really significantly sad storyline with involving Vietnam and the person he was in love with. So we saw that with him before. But she has had a succession of, and these are like you said, essentially losing your daughter twice. And then even back in time, I believe she did marry Raymond way back when, because remember she had been there for a while.
Yeah,
remember how it got staggered? So some of them had been there for a few years before it got to 1963. So I think by the time we got to 63, I think she's already married to him at that point.
I think she's there the longest out of all the characters, if I recall correctly.
I believe so. I'm 90%.
I think she's there in the 50s.
Yeah, I don't remember what year it was, but I do remember that she was there for a pretty damn long time. So, like I said, but now, coming back to the episode, the sad thing is, once again, she finds out that she's not a mom, and which is where I was going to do my nice little segue, because speaking of moms, Klaus recruits 5 to take a road trip with him to Pennsylvania, because he wants to find the woman who would therefore be his birth mom. And even if he hadn't said it already, I don't know if he actually did. Once they said Pennsylvania, I was already like, okay, it's Amish. We're going. It's got to be. It's good. There's only one reason you're picking Pennsylvania. It has to be an Amish woman. I know what's going to happen. And yes, he does show up with the Amish. And unfortunately, they're not like the Amish that we see in a show like like Letterkenny or something, which would have been fun. I would say he has a rather ill-fated encounter with the Amish, who were pretty mean. But when he's on the run from them, he also finds out that the woman who should have been his mother actually died on his birthday. So that's a major revelation there. And then, for some reason, which in my mind at least isn't really made all that clear, so I kind of just have to nod and go along with it. It's one of those, the writer in me is like going, could I get away with that, or is that going to be questioned in the room? Because this woman, who apparently it was her sister, I think they established, but it would have been... But she also happened to keep a binder of articles of all these other women who died that very same day. Yeah. And part of me is like going, wait a minute. First of all, where's she getting the newspapers from?
How did an Amish woman do all that research?
What's that binder made out of? Is it horsehide tied with the whiskers of a kitten? I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, the women, however, turns out these are the women who are actually the mothers of each one of them, which means technically, if you don't go too far down the timey-wimey track, but I'm going to do that because I'm all about time travel, Kimber. Technically, none of them are supposed to exist at this point.
Right. Which goes back to the whole, the grandfather paradox, which is that in the first episode that they talk about that, or is it?
We are literally getting to the grandfather paradox right now.
Right. Okay.
Right now.
One more thing I will say. So in the early 90s, there was this touring punk band called the Hostile Amish, they were a punk band that would dress up like Amish, and part of their routine is they would churn butter on stage and throw it into like the mosh pit. I'll just say that. But I was reminded of the Hostile Amish in that hilarious bit when Klaus is running away from the village and like over the hill come all the Amish guys and he's yelling at Five to start the car.
Start the car.
And it reminded me of Indiana
Jones. Oh, it's totally Indiana Jones.
That had to have been lifted from that.
Oh, it's
so funny.
It's absolutely. There's a few little slide references or lifts that we're going to get to.
Yeah.
See, I always thought very highly of the Amish, but then I heard about this story that happened in the mid '80s. There was this guy who apparently someone like smeared ice cream on his nose, and he got really pissed off and beat the shit out of someone. It was in all the papers. That was like back in 1984. I think they even did a movie about it. Yeah. Anyway.
What's the line he said? Like, it's my cousin from out of town. It's my cousin from Ohio. I was like, oh, I don't like the Ohio Amish or whatever that line was. I can't remember.
The English.
Yeah.
Don't you like that I followed up your Indiana Jones reference with
another Amish Indiana Jones? Yeah. Well done. Well played.
That's wild. Oh, by the way, I know we're like a half an hour, 40 minutes into the podcast. There was one thing I forgot to mention at the start of this podcast. I love that I'm going to say it now. 39, 40 minutes, whatever it is. By the way, this is our 350th podcast. That's a number of significance, yet we're not doing a significant podcast. No offense, Kimber. So,
Sorry.
I kind of blame you. No, I blame myself.
Call it like 349.5.
No.
Do something important next week.
The boys? I wish 350 had been for Herogasm, then I would have done something special. Maybe I would have put a porno clip on it.
I haven't watched that season, so I have reasons, but yeah.
Oh, there you go. All right. Before I kick you off the podcast, let me get back to this. So number 5 has a meeting with everybody. Well, everybody except Luther, because you're still unaware that he's been kidnapped. And that's when he explains to everybody that somehow they've not just created a time paradox. They've created something called a grandfather paradox. But there'll be more about that when we get to the next episode. But by the time I noticed as we're getting closer to the end of this episode, as we move forward, part of me was thinking, okay, so that's 2 episodes where we've got this weird ball of energy just in the basement, just sending out the occasional wave of killing things like cows and dogs.
Dogs, yeah.
But then
the animals are getting larger, from like pugs to cattle.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
But don't worry. When we get to the next episode, we'll actually see an actual human get whacked by the wave. But at the end of this episode, it's when the the Sparrows pretty much realize there's no point in holding on to Luther. They let him go, but he swings right back and then floats up to hang up and hook up with Sloane, who I was hoping for Luther's sake that she's not going to mind that she's got like the upper body of Gorilla Grodd, so
Yeah, I needed to scrub that from my brain.
Trying to think of and the only thing I think I might have left out that was kind of fun in this episode was the fight scene that happens at the pharmacy. Speaking of Diego, between Diego, I think the character's name was Alphonse, the one.
Alfonso, or Alphonse, yeah.
With the craggy face, but when you punch him, it's like that power is being transferred back, and you get hit with it. I kind of kept thinking, what would his code name be? Like Echo or Reverberate or something?
Yeah. I'm a little confused by his power because there are points where, like, obviously, punching him in the face, you get punched in the face. They established that in the first episode with Allison and then with Diego in the pharmacy. But then, like, kicking him in the stomach doesn't seem to do anything, but then the kid or somebody cuts him in the leg, and then the kid gets cut in the leg. So his power seems a little uneven. Like,
I think he has to, my assumption is he has to consciously think to do it. And if if he knows a punch is coming, he can channel it back or something. That's my guess.
That's very forgiving of you. Nice save.
I didn't do the research on it. I'll even be more honest. I didn't even realize that when the kid stabbed him in the leg, then the kid's leg also got messed up. I kind of totally.
Yeah, my sons and I were like watching that scene very intensely, like trying to figure out what the nature of his power was, because it seemed to be kind of uneven. I mean, I got it. I thought it was kind of an interesting power. Like, how would you actually defeat that guy?
Maybe
we're going to see how you defeat that guy.
Or maybe it's erratic and it comes and it goes for him. Yeah. Otherwise, because if he had it the whole time, wouldn't technically that make him the most powerful among them, because you couldn't lay a hand on him then. So.
Well, that's interesting as we see.
But he's not number one.
When we see flashbacks of his character in subsequent episodes, and you see what he used to look like, you get an understanding of why he looks like what he looks like now. Too.
Have I seen that? I don't know if I've seen that. Maybe I missed that. Or maybe it's an episode I haven't seen yet, Kimber. Anyway, so the next episode is Pockets Full of Lightning. 5 episodes. So at the beginning of that one, we get the grandfather paradox explained. And I love the way they do the explanation. Mm-hmm. I love that it's that. I mean, it's kind of a classic gag to do it this way, where it's kind of like it's almost like a little training film or a PSA. Very, very goofily corporate. The only thing, at least they didn't make it at least they didn't go and try to make it like very 1950s-ish, because I would say, okay, that's been done enough times, dudes. We can't do that gag anymore.
You saw that in Loki.
Loki kind of ruined it for everybody else, and they weren't the first ones to do that either, quite frankly.
Right.
But I love the little character of, I think his character's name is Elmer, where he goes back in time and kills his grandfather, but he makes the mistake of doing that before his own mother was born, so she never exists, which means Elmer never existed, but Elmer killed his grandfather, so it's like, okay.
Don't be Elmer.
It's kind of like the opposite of the old song, "I'm My Own Grandpa," whatever. But I do like the fact that it was all acted out as though, at the end of it, as though it was like a trailer for the whole commission. I really enjoyed that whole aspect of it.
Yeah.
So we pick up with Luther. It's Happy Luther. And that's when another wave hits. And that's when we know that, this doesn't just kill animals. It killed the poor newspaper vendor dude, whatever. Mm-hmm. Now, does he just go and snatch the stuff, or does he? He does. He goes and grabs another box of condoms.
Yeah, after the guy dies, he robs his stand.
Luther, a horrible person. Doesn't even leave any money. Yeah. Anyway, but at some point right after this, through news reports, we learn that hundreds of people have suddenly vanished in the city. And one can extrapolate, because we see this wave goes much further than just the city. It's probably a lot more than just hundreds of people that have vanished. It's probably thousands, if not, tens of thousands or whatever. This is the episode, I would say, is where you see characters are really trying to get shit done. That's how I looked at this episode. So we have the thing with Victor and Allison are going to meet with the Sparrows. And we have that moment where we see that Allison actually improvises, and she makes the decision to allow the Sparrows to continue to think that they are holding Marcus captive.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment, I was thinking, is that a good plan? because so basically you want to confirm their worst thoughts about you. Is that a good plan? And I keep thinking, it's only because of the dark journey Allison is now taking. Yeah. I don't think anyone else would have thought to do that. Diego, maybe because he's screwy, but otherwise, I was like going, this might not work out well. I don't know if this is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the Sparrows have their own plan, and they already realize if whether they get Marcus back or not, Ben and Faye, they clearly want to, at this point at least, they want to wipe the Umbrellas off the map. And again, I kept getting worried about, they got some crazy magic, creepy powers on that team. Because then remember, the whole thing with Ben with the creatures and tentacles that come out of him, which is just bizarre. And she's got the thing where she's watching people through her ravens, and then but I think something becomes a raven, and I don't know what the hell's going on with her. Her powers are, I'm not totally clear on what she can do, but it seems like she's kind of terrifying, so I assume. I mean, she's got those sunglasses, come on.
She looks like she's out of the Matrix.
And when you realize the other people on the team, like Alphonse and Jamie, they clearly wouldn't mind getting rid of the Umbrellas as well. And I love, of course, they all understand what the floating cube named Christopher is saying, which is, it's the classic gag. It's like, oh yeah, of course Luke understands what R2-D2 is saying. Beep, bop, boop. Oh, of course, he just did the Gettysburg Address. Makes perfect sense.
I like his name is Christopher, but like, I think it's just Ben that refers to him as Chris. He's got like his, like the one guy's got, like the one brother's got a nickname for him.
Well, I was thinking about it because I was like, okay, he reminds me of the Cosmic Cube. Cosmic Cube is CC.
Right.
Christopher Cross. There you go, Chris. Anyway.
So I had a question too, because, we know all of these children were born on this October 1st, 1989, right?
Right.
So I was trying to picture, because the season begins with the birth of a kid in South Korea on the subway, which maybe I think we assume was Ben, but we don't know for sure. What was the birth of Chris? What did that look like? Was he like the size of a Rubik's Cube, and like he grew to be like a 2 foot by 2 foot cube, or was he always that big? And how did that birth work? I want to see that flashback.
I would like to see that I will agree with you. I would like to see that flashback as well. See, this we can agree. So, meanwhile, I get confused. I always seem to call 5 number 5, though I know that sounds like I'm referencing an 80s movie that I have no interest in checking out, just before anyone suggests it. Scott has not seen Short Circuit. Scott is not going to see Short Circuit.
Yeah, please do not suggest
Short Circuit.
You're not missing anything.
But also, didn't we establish on our previous pod, last time we did the Umbrella Academy, that wasn't 5 the name of one of Linus's a character? I think there was a character on Peanuts whose name was 5 also.
Oh, God, I can't remember that.
Anyway, number 5 and Lila clearly still hate each other, but they also realize they need to work together because they need to combine their power with one of those faulty suitcases, and that is what might help them travel through time, or at least travel to the commission itself. I love how people keep going down to that basement to get the briefcase, and instead, they get a little distracted by that big glowing ball that which as we said before, that Grace thinks is God. Maybe it's got something to do with why they named her Grace in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But here, because before we saw it was Marcus, in this episode alone, we see Ben and Faye encounter, the ball light. Then later, we have Klaus also gets to see the ball light. At least that's after he spends some really weird quality time with Reggie. But while Klaus is looking at this fireball god or whatever, and 5 has been able to travel with Lila to what appears to be what was left of the commission, the rest of the gang has a showdown with the Sparrows at the hotel. At least they're about to. Until this dude shows up. Now, I've neglected to mention him already, but I'm mentioning him now. We've seen this guy walking around. I think we see his name at one point is it Lester Pocket?
Lester Pocket.
Okay. Yeah. If I got I was worried I might get the first name wrong. I know his last name was Pocket. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's not who it is at all. It's Harlan, who is this grown-up son of Sissy from season 2. We've noticed that he's been listening to different types of sound on his headphones just to, to weed out all the noise. It could be a tape of bees, it could be a tape of the ocean or whatever, wind. He walks into the hallway and he lets out a massive blast of deadly energy that pretty much throws everybody back. And looks like it kills at least 2 of the sparrows. And somehow, because I guess, and it's one of those things with TV shows that everyone can recognize other people, even when they have totally different actors playing them. Victor recognizes that this is an old adult version of Harlan. I question that, but I let it go because it's TV. So it's. I mean, I know I glossed over some things that happened in the episode. If you want to get into them, we can or not. Like, some of the stuff with, like, with Five and Lila and all that stuff. But it's the thing that's interesting and what I'm enjoying about the season and this episode and then the subsequent ones is it's a show that both moves really fast, yet it does still take the time to have character moments that are really kind of nice, that really kind of make the show kind of pop a bit more. In a weird way, it reminds me of the way I would refer to Peacemaker earlier this year, where Peacemaker can go crazy, silly, absurd action, violence, whatever, but still has time for all these really nicely crafted or well-written dialogue character moments. And that's what they're doing with Umbrella Academy as well. I mean, they had done that before, but I think if I'm remembering when we spoke about this back in 2020, I think that we were in agreement that we liked season 2 more so than season 1. We like season 1, don't get us wrong. If I'm right, it's a nice origin thing, but they did such a nice job of really further developing all the different characters in season 2 compared to the first one, and I think they're just continuing that here as well.
Yeah, I've got it. So last night I listened to our 2.5 hours of season 1, season 2.
Oh my God, why would you do that?
2 hours and 38 minutes. I think I like season 2 a little less, and I think they split up the characters. They did their own thing. It was good for character development and so on, which was great. But I like this is back to season 1 where they're kind of together again for the season as a family, which is great. And I also liked, again, because we're trying to keep this breezy, you just kind of touched on Reginald and and
which character are you trying to think of? Grace?
No, the encounter in the office.
Alphonse and Jamie when they're no. Klaus?
Klaus, sorry, jeez. Klaus and Reginald. I think they've had some of the best interactions in all the series, and that one where they meet in the office and. They've always had an interesting relationship, whether it's the barbershop thing in a previous season or the conversations that they have in this season with him being drugged and so on is so almost kind of tender from like a father figure who's like generally like a monster, but somehow like Klaus manages to connect with him a little bit. Mm-hmm. Although in this time thread, Reginald is a very different Reginald than he is in the Umbrella Academy's time thread because he's being drugged and he's a little more passive than he was. He's
minimized. He's been made kind of like useless.
Right.
He doesn't have a standing. He's not seen as an authority figure. He's not
but Klaus kind of spots the other Sparrow guys that kind of pressuring Reginald to like sign paperwork and make him take his medicine and so on. It's almost like the reverse of like when Reginald is forcing Vanya to take medicine in the first season in order to tamp down her powers. this is like, it's just like a ripple effect of that same sort of thing going on.
Oh, that's totally deliberate. That's
Yeah.
totally, and good on you for catching that, because I thought of that. I thought about that the episode after that for some reason. I remember it occurring to me like, oh, wait a minute, that's like the thing he was doing with Vanya all along. Oh, that's smart. I didn't even click until it just occurred to me like later on for some reason. I think it was a scene with Victor, and all of a sudden it just popped into my head like, oh yeah.
And I almost wonder, like, is Reginald, because Reginald says in the first episode of this season that, like, he consciously did this. He went and got like a different set of kids because he wanted it to work out differently, and he thought he wanted it to work out better. And I don't think it's turned out as well for Reginald as in some ways as it did in the first round of children, even though the dynamics are very different. I don't know. It's interesting. You don't get to like reset and like have 7 different children, right. like I have a whole different life.
Although technically, if memory serves, he dies.
Sure, that's true too.
So there is that.
He gets the big reset. Yeah. New family, new life. Yeah.
And just to put my 1.5 cents in on about the season 2 comment that you made, which I totally get. I've said it a billion times when we talk about all different shows over the years. Your classic thing on most shows is you split up the characters, so a lot of the journey for the show is bringing these characters back together.
100%.
Every season of Lost was like that. Every season of Game of Thrones is like that, and so on and so forth. What I liked about what they did in season 2 is like, yes, that is what they do when they kick off the season, but number one, it makes sense, and number 2, it doesn't take that long to eventually get everybody together, and slowly but surely. And I enjoyed the individual stories as we finally got to them being with each other. So that's why it worked for me. I will be the first one to go, oh, come on, enough, But they didn't. They don't. All 3 seasons so far, or 2.5 seasons that I've seen. They don't waste time on this show, which I greatly appreciate. They don't drag stuff out, at least not the way I see it, except for that ball of energy, which is just
right. And I think, and you're getting to the 5th episode in a second here, and like the halfway point in the season is that I think in all 3 seasons of the Umbrella Academy, they've taken their time in the first half of the season to really build a lot of individual characters, and here they've sort of split up people a little differently into different duos than they did in previous seasons and so on. And when we get to the end of the 5th episode and into the second half of this season and into like the main mission where they've finally established what is really going on, and now you've got 5 episodes to sort of resolve that.
Yeah.
It's a great pace, and it goes back to your point at the beginning of whether do you dump all the episodes at once? Do you do it weekly? What's that strategy? That storytelling strategy?
Right.
I think they've done a great job of doing that. Like, give the characters a lot of time to breathe in the first half of the season, and then just kind of go in on the big resolution in the second half.
Right. Then you'll get the considerable and constant escalation from episode to episode, which is what makes me want to watch the next one kind of phenomenon. It's like I got to have another chip kind of phenomenon, which goes back to when we were watching shows on DVD for the first time. Like, I got to watch another episode of Buffy now and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, speaking of episodes, let's get to the next one, which is titled Kugel Blitz. This one's a doozy. We kick it off with the history of Harlan. And we go through time and all the different moves he had to make with his mom, and because of the situations he would find himself getting into. And I kept thinking when I'm watching, and they're kind of giving us an idea about what his abilities are or whatever, he was reminding me a little bit of David from Legion. I kept thinking of that character, and I loved most of Legion. Season 2 is a little, but stupid big. Giant.
It's a great montage, fantastic montage.
Yeah,
I love it.
Is that the one with the conceit with the closing of the trunk, and that's like, and it represents like how they have to move from place to place.
Yeah, each trunk slam is a different timestamp and a different location.
And the sad thing is you realize it is all due to any type of outburst that Harlan's ever had, which most of which are almost justifiable. If you're getting bullied, what are you going to do? You know, you just you get, because it seems like there's just an emotional reaction rather than an actually anything that's premeditated or whatever.
Well, you're going to destroy the universe, obviously.
Right. Well,
you're going to start with rabbits and destroy the universe.
Well, that's how it always starts. Yeah. I saw Animal Farm, or Secret of Nim.
And even the subtle or not so subtle things where they show like the mom, like the first time, like when she slams the trunk and she's like coughing.
Yes.
Like obviously, like she's getting ill. Like they just kind of layer that in. It's good storytelling without any dialogue.
Right, and speaking with the getting ill, we do know that in this montage we get to October 1st, 1989, and that's where we see that she dies of cancer, and we also see Harlan goes ballistic, you know, at that moment. Now, later in the episode, I'll say it now, we also learn that this is the incident that actually killed all of their mothers. We see, and speaking of interesting montages, later on we get a montage that's both humorous and terrifying at the same time. It's basically a montage of all these women, you know, having major brain hemorrhages and gushing blood out their ears or out their mouth or out their eyes. It's weird because it's done. There's a slight comic nature to it, yet it's still brutal at the same time. So you don't really. It's hard to really laugh at it.
Yeah, I thought the first. I'm with it. The first couple, I kind of laughed, and then like I kind of stopped laughing.
Yeah.
And by the end of that, I was like, "Oh God, this is pretty awful."
Right, and we should also clarify, which it's an interesting way they present it. Because when we see that later montage, it happens at a point in the episode where Victor encounters Harlan, who's obviously clearly agitated in the corridor, because he's upset that he had just found that file from
the Amish file
that the Amish person somehow kept. Still don't know how they got it. I guess they can have newspapers.
It's not the Rockford files; it's the Amish files.
Yeah, pretty much. See, now I know that we're the same age because you know someone still somewhat old would have went X-Files. It's the Amish files. We went Rockford files. Wow. Finding that file of all the mysteriously dead moms. It's when they hold hands when he's having this little episode. Victor sees the montage. She experiences it. That's how Victor knows what had happened. Now, whether they also experience, you know, that Jeremy Renner cover of House of the Rising Sun, I'm not sure about that. Oh, by the way, it's funny because
I'll cross that off my list now.
Because, well, first of all, I don't know if any of them will listen to this podcast, but there's been a running gag for a little while about Jeremy Renner because I'm kind of. I'm not really anti-Jeremy Renner, actually. I mean, I actually really like the Hawkeye TV show, but I don't exactly love him either. You know, it depends on the movie. I like him in some things, don't like whatever. But I made fun of the whole music thing because it's like, oh yeah, like Bruce Willis did, and Don Johnson, all those guys. You know, great stuff, guys.
Eddie Murphy.
And I couldn't help to make this to be totally self-centered about this. The very first thing script I ever wrote, there's a scene that happens at one point in the story, and then at the end we come back to something connected to it. And I had used in the earlier scene, it's like the original version of the song "Happy Together," the Turtles song. And then at the end, I went and found, because there's been a few covers of it by these tiny bands, and I found like this indie band was like a really fast, you know, kind of obnoxious version of it, and I had that there. And in this, if I'm not mistaken, in the earlier montage, I think it's during the montage, don't we get the Animals version of House of the Rising Sun? They
play both versions.
And then towards the end, we get the Jeremy Renner version. And I was like, wow, that's what's next? The Drifters doing Under the Boardwalk, and then here's the Bruce Willis version. Yes, he did a version of it on that album. It's not good.
So do you think Sissy's cancer was caused by Harlan?
Oh.
I got a Dr. Manhattan from The Watchmen sort of vibe from this. Like, because he's getting older, she's getting older, she's getting sicker as they move. They don't explain it in any other way. And I wonder whether he feels responsible for his mother's death. Like somehow his powers got some sort of like energy thing that gives off in the proximity, or does she just randomly get cancer and die?
Well, they established she was a smoker before, so she smoked.
Sure.
So, and especially nowadays, if you're gonna show someone as a smoker, it's like, oh, well, don't forget you better kill them with cancer later on.
Otherwise, you're not doing your civic duty.
Mad Men. Okay. You just have to kill one of them, but it has to be a major character. So they do. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. By the way, it's better than everything else you're watching. Go watch Mad Men, people. Yeah. Anyway, so that's an interesting idea. I could totally see that, but I'm because I had assumed it was lung cancer, smoking cancer, whatever. And you think, especially if you have cancer, if you hang out with someone who's like radioactive, wouldn't the radiation help? Anyway, so. But then I'm thinking of a character on another show that you kind of said something strange about before, who is exhibiting these radioactive things. So, Soldier Boy. Anyway, So you should really watch it, dude. Anyway, get over whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, despite Diego's usual, they are the enemy attitude, and Allison's new but not so improved, no more Miss Nice Gal approach, because she has so much anger in her. She can really only, take it out on someone like Sloane. They're still looking for that briefcase. Mm-hmm. But we already know, even though I didn't mention it, because I can't tell you, I'm not going to recap every single goddamn thing, because we're not going to have a 10-hour podcast. They're still looking for the podcast that we know that Lila actually took already a while ago. Although I have to admit, I got a little confused when Lila took the briefcase. Did Lila change into a... What was the thing with the raven that's one of the phase ravens? Does Lila have transform? Does she have that ability? What are Lila's abilities?
Lila's abilities is she can absorb the ability of anybody else.
Okay, got it. That makes sense.
That's how they defeat her at the end of season 2. Is they hit her all at once and she becomes overwhelmed because she can't handle everybody's abilities. Okay. She's like the Batman Superman, like put together.
The composite. Oh, she's the composite Superman.
She's the composite. Yeah.
I love that we do an inside joke based on a conversation we had before we started recording, which continue the tradition of inside jokes no one will get. That's why we're so popular. Yeah. No, I totally, like I said, 2020 feels like it's 20 years ago, so I did not remember what it was. So thank you for filling that in for me. So she actually grabbed some of Faye's ability to do what she did. That makes perfect sense to me now.
Yeah.
But Sloane does not know what happened to the briefcase. I am curious though. There's that scene where she kind of does the I heard a rumor thing to Sloane, who seems like she's at this point she's willing to go along with everything. She's telling them the truth anyway. We know that. But then when this happens, it seems like she's almost trying to fight against it, like she's in agony from it, even though it's her only real answer is going to be, I don't know about your briefcase. I don't know anything about this. I was a little confused by that.
So I read that as that she was already telling all the truth that she could, and the rumor power was still pressing her to do something that she couldn't do more of. And so that was overwhelming her. And so she wasn't resisting it. It was that she had no more information to give. And so that's why she was suffering. That was my read on it. I have no real information to go on other than that.
That has as much plausibility as anything I could have made up myself, so I'll go along with it. Now, before we talk, we're going to talk this episode and the next one, we're going to talk a bit more about Allison. But before we get there, I just want to mention, just to be kind of a wussy person for a moment, it was, it's kind of nice to see Luther at this point, what feels like a genuine relationship for him. Considering what we've seen with this character in those first 2 seasons, where he's kind of to put it mildly, a neophyte when it comes to really like personal interaction. I mean, he spent most of his life on the moon, for God's sake, or in a house with an unloving father figure and a monkey, it wasn't really, and a robot. Not really much for him. So it's kind of like, oh, good for him. And she seems nice, and she's soaked in sincerity the way he is, and she's cute, and he's cute, except for the weird shoulder thing,
monkey thing. Yeah.
Again, I mean, I'm looking at this as on an episode to episode basis. Could it be possible that this won't be the case later on? Maybe Sloane is going to be nice, also not so nice. Who knows? But right now, I think they're the show's cute couple. I just don't want to be so naive not to think something bad's still going to happen to these two at some point, especially if Allison's around.
Yeah, I mean the series has been rough on like loving relationships. Of course, you had Vanya and Sissy, and that doesn't wind up all that great, and it just shows it's tough, and maybe it's the superhero to superhero or whatever academy thing that makes it finally happen. Yeah.
So Allison, now we talked a bit about her in this way already, because at this point, you're really seeing the depths that Allison has fallen to when she tries to rumor herself to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, it doesn't work that way, Allison. You can't use your rumor on a mirror reflection. Apparently, you can only shatter the mirror. And then, I mean, did any of us miss the idea, the whole fact that, she tries essentially to try to take a page from Victor's book, where she uses one of the shards from the mirror to cut her hair, basically going on with the idea that, Vanya cut her hair and became a totally new person who seems, much more happy and content with themselves. Maybe she can do something along the same lines, at least just to find that quote unquote happiness. But once again, like the rumor thing, doesn't work that way, Allison. So, but it's just, there's something, I think for me, when she cuts her hair, it was pointing more to the tragic nature of her character, more not just everything we already know that she's lost, because obviously she's dealt with a lot of loss. We've talked about that. Also, I would also say obviously that's not exactly new in the superhero trope. I think every other superhero has lost a lot. Lost parents, lost loved ones, lost girlfriends, lost whatever, wives and husbands, whatever. Geez, that's what's happening with her. But when she tries to do that, there's something so, it's not even naive. It's desperate, and it's so, to try to rationalize something like that, to think this will actually make any difference. You're watching it like, no, it's not, you're not going to feel any better. This is not going to change. You're in a dark place, and this is not going to bring any light there.
And honestly, when she picked the mirror shard up and she pulled her hair back, I thought she was going to slice open her jugular. When she pulled her hair back like that and she paused for a second, I thought she was totally going to slice her throat open, because I thought she was at such a dark point, and then it had to have, that would have taken the series in a different place. But I thought the hair cutting thing was weird for her character. I mean, again,
well, she's
I got to see where she's going this season.
She's flailing. Yeah. I mean, just the fact that she decides that she goes out for a drink with Diego later on to a bar where she may or may not be able to work out some of those aggressions. Obviously, we know that she does because we watched the episode that came after that. A lot of this got built up from her time in Dallas. When you realize that she points out herself that the others, and again, obviously, although Diego might be the one who's like, hey, I was put in a booby hatch for a big chunk of time. I didn't have it that easy. But they didn't have to deal with being a black woman in the early 60s and everything that went along with that and everything that she experienced. That was kind of major compared to what everyone else dealt with.
Yeah, she's the only character in this season that we see flashbacks for Dallas.
Right. So it's
the lunch counter, like abusive people, like it's like all that trauma. She's just like over and over and over again. It's in her head.
Right. It's playing over and over, and so it's convenient to see a bar that's got like the stars and bars hanging outside. Like, all right, I got a feeling.
I'm gonna go in there and work it out.
So speaking of aggressive behavior, there's still a clear rift between Ben and Faye, and this is an interesting scene where they meet with Reggie to tell him about what happened. And it's like, okay, so the guy who basically don't have shown any respect for as being, you're a quote unquote father figure, authority, whatever. But things have gotten to the point where now you do go to him. And it was interesting seeing how he would react to the story, what had happened to two of the family. Whether they really act like their family or not is debatable. But he does imply that there may still be a way for them to get the upper hand in the whole situation. But it's hard to get a handle on the dynamic between Reggie and the Sparrows at this point. Because, like we were saying before, we know that they're drugging him. And they're treating him, you're just like, okay, we just need you to sign some legal papers whenever it's necessary. He's clearly and fully aware of it. He's not happy about it. So that's why I just think it's odd, not just that they would even consult with him, but that he would even want to help them. Because part of me at this point, why would you want to help them at this point? I don't. It's interesting. I don't know. I didn't know how to really read that exactly.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if he's helping them so on. Like I took he's kind of challenging them and almost he's not like taking delight in their flailing and their failure and so on, but it's like finally it's almost like he seems to like, oh, like you thought you were going to like run this team. Like you thought you all were like the smart ones. You were going to do this without me. And I think he's almost like relishing at it. Like a little bit like that. You know what? I mean, because I don't know where to insert this, but I think you gave me an opening. Like when I think
That's what
she said. Stop. When I was thinking about like why did they pick the Sparrows, and I know there were like a million allusions to Sparrows in the previous season or whatever. Like when I look at the two teams and I look at the names, so here's my theory: the Sparrows, like the bird sparrows, like they move as a group. They're well coordinated and they move as a flock and they act as a team. And they are, for as dysfunctional as they are and for as awful human beings as they are, they work as a team. Whereas I think the Umbrella Academy, although they are not close to each other, they protect one another like an umbrella. And so they are, when you look at two different families, one that sort of like moves together versus one that like sort of protects one another. That's my theory on Umbrella versus Sparrow. I have no idea whether that was intentional.
That's not bad. I'll improvise and take it one step further with the Umbrella Academy. I like to think of what you said is correct, and I think where they went wrong is the problem with an umbrella, and what happened with Ben is like when you break that one spoke of an umbrella, the umbrella essentially it becomes. We try to keep using it, we all do, but at a certain point, like okay, we're throwing this out. It's not usable, and that's kind of what happened to that team. You know, once they lost Ben, you know, I think they tried to stay together as a unit, but it just kind of fell apart. So then Diego goes up being like a vigilante, and what's his face is on the moon, and she goes off to be a Hollywood star, and so on and so forth.
Tell-all novel, and so yeah.
Can't believe I actually remembered all that just now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here, after Diego pretty much flat out dismisses Klaus, asking about that blinding orb of light in the basement, he assigns him babysitting duty to look after Stan because he's gonna punish Stan for his little Molotov cocktail incident. He's giving him cleanup duty at the hotel. And what I kind of enjoyed about this, again, it's at least up to a point, it's kind of a lighter thing to have in the show, and I appreciate the balance of light and dark in a show like Umbrella Academy. These two, because basically it would be an uncle and a nephew, I guess. The kid and Klaus, they bond, and I have a friend. When they first watched it, they told me right after that, "Oh, Klaus is my favorite." And I was like, really? Klaus is kind of... And then it was one of those things that the more I watched Klaus in both those seasons and now this season, I realized, I think I understand why someone would pick Klaus as their favorite. I really can kind of get it now. I didn't think that way early first season, but because you've peeled back so many layers of this character, in many ways he's he's so infinitely relatable. Even with all his excesses, he's really a kind of a fun character in that sense. That moment when they're in that room where I think Klaus is lying on the bed and Stan is pocketing this thing and that thing all around. and I love the fact that we think that he's blissfully unaware of all that happening. He absolutely knows Stan is swiping stuff and makes him put it all back. It's one of those things like, okay, it's a comic moment. It's just a light comedic moment, but it also is a reminder we shouldn't underestimate Klaus. He's done major things. Remember what he did in season 2. And we haven't even found out his real power until this fucking episode. Oh, I said fuck, sorry. We're explicit. We're allowed to say fuck on this podcast. Because when they're in the corridors, he's very intrigued by the White Buffalo Suite. Mm-hmm. So they break into there, and everything up until this point, like I said, has been really nice and sweet. And, the decor there is interesting. He's having little memories of voices of his dad and whatever. And Stan accidentally picks up, he doesn't accidentally pick up a spear gun. He accidentally fires the spear gun and kills Klaus.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, you were watching, and we know this is the 4th episode, and we're like, well, we know they're not killing Klaus. That would be,
right.
The show's not that crazy.
Yeah, one of the most popular characters. Yeah.
So, at least you wait to the final episode. Mm-hmm. So and once that happens, I was already like, huh. I remembered before we got to it in the episode, towards the beginning of the next episode, that he had that little weird journey with his dad in that previous season. Mm-hmm. To come to a form of like the afterlife, and that is where we end up going a little bit later with him as well. Now, but at the same, we switch over to 5 and Lila, and they're at the commission or what's left of it. Didn't you think because there's a certain point when they're walking around, 5 is constantly farting and itching, which we remember from season 2. We know what that means, and I was almost getting a little frustrated, like. Doesn't he? He should know what that means. Why is he not cognizant of this? Why is he not, wary of who might else be there? Because that usually means one of you're about to encounter one of yourselves, which is basically what ends up happening. I just got a little frustrated because 5 is in many ways he's the smartest of them, and I hate when I see a character who I know is really intelligent not picking up on something that's pretty clear and obvious. I know it can be explained away, but it bothers me a little bit.
I honestly think he knew what those symptoms were, because we've established that before. And he was just pushing through them because of the importance of the mission. And it was almost like, I don't know whether he had explained those manifestations of those things
not to her,
before, not to Lila before, but I think he was aware of what was going on. I sensed it in his face and so on, because he got more concerned as it got towards the door, and it got more fidgety and farty. So he knew what was going on, but I think he just knew that, to him, that means we were getting closer to where we needed to be. We were getting closer to something important.
Right. Oh, by the way, one of my all-time favorite cartoon shows, Fidgety and
Farty. Yeah.
Because here, as far as 5 can tell, the paradox is not just a timeline disruptor; it's a universe destroyer. It's kind of like the theory that's kind of like the Big Bang in reverse. Mm-hmm. And they discover, when they're going through stuff at the remnants of the commission, other than seeing different things like, oh, here's footage of that guy that we really liked back in season 2. Oh, he gets killed. Whatever his name is, who cares? But they discovered that the protocol for such an event is that the founder of the commission has to be brought to the underground bunker.
I love it's got a label, a name on the door.
Of course, it's like the Batman, the old Batman TV show where they have to have everything labeled. That doesn't even. It's the Bat computer. Why do you have to have it labeled the Bat computer? So they find the bunker. They go inside. They find the founder, who's a feeble old man in what looks like some sort of iron lung special hyperbaric chamber kind of deal. And the revelation, which I'm going to guess for many viewers probably wasn't much of one at this point, especially if you were paying attention to all the farting and the fidgeting, is that the founder is actually 5 himself, only as a very, very old man. but we immediately explain away the fact that they're not losing their minds now is because the room itself is paradox proof. So that's why he was experiencing this outside the room, but once he enters the room, he doesn't fill it with his whatever he ate for lunch earlier that day.
It's like a very like Lost thing in that situation too. Like that bunker is like, yeah.
Yes, apparently designed by Dharma. I see. I see what you're saying there. Yeah. And they clarify that all permutations of one person can exist in that room, as opposed to outside the room. But by the way, which also told me like, okay, I keep thinking that you've told us this, that at some point later this season, we're going to get like a multiple versions of people in one room happening in this area. Could be wrong. That might just been just one the scene. Just one of my little speculative things I had. But we get the explanation of what a Kugelblitz is. And we know that, and once there's a reference to it being made of being like a ball of lightning, there's some sort of an extra kinky form of a black hole that just sucks in universes and such, leaving oblivion. We've heard the word oblivion a bunch of times here. And, of course, we know that that's the thing that must be in the basement at the Academy. But Old Man Five, in his final words, he says to Young Five, whatever you do, don't save the world. And then he dies. So I love the bizarre mystery of such a statement, because now we're going to be waiting for that moment where it looks like that decision, and now you will realize, oh, that's what he meant. But I'm kind of curious. So I'm imagining that won't play out till either the penultimate episode or the final episode. But I am very curious, because we do see Five questioning that later on. What the hell does that mean? So I'm very curious about that.
Right, and also to me, it's like, save the world in which timeline? Like, don't save the world like you saved it previously? Is there another event coming, like this current one with the Kugelblitz? Like, don't save it now. Don't ever save it. I mean, yeah.
Or maybe you want them to save a cheerleader instead. Anyway, that's right.
Save the cheerleader, save the world. Yep.
Going to reference good shows and bad shows. That's right.
Well, stop it. It's a good show, obviously, but you're referencing.
No, it's not. It's not. First season is not bad. But it
First season.
But after that, it's only because Jeff Loeb's involved.
Agreed.
And then Tim Sally drew the stuff. Oh, well, rest in peace, Tim Sally. So we also, before they leave this place, Five has a moment alone with his old self, and he sees this tattoo on Old Man Five's chest, and he
cuts it off.
Because,
a little nasty.
He doesn't have an iPhone or anything with him where he can snap a picture of it. So he's just like, I'll just cut this entire section of skin, this swath of flesh, because he sees on it.
I won't take a sketch of it or anything. No. Like, yeah.
And what it looks like, at least initially when we first see it in this scene, it looks kind of like the rose of an elaborate compass or something, one of those old-timey kind of drawings. But it's a lot that was happening in that episode. But it's the next one, I think, and now we can finally be talking about the final one that I saw, at least. Way to go, Kimber. The next one is The Kindest Cut. And then we see Klaus. Klaus is in what's initially this black and white landscape, although as we progress through it and forward, colors beyond what's on his shirt do start to appear, but they're more muted and washed out. And he sees that girl on the bicycle, who we saw back in season 2. Now, they have never specifically declared or said that this girl is supposed to be God, but she's certainly the one who's in charge of this afterlife. She's maybe even seen as the creator of all this. So if she's not specifically, God, she does have some sort of deity-like presence here. So, but it's obviously that they're going to play it vague as well they should. And for people, I think this probably got mentioned on. You just listened to the old podcast, so you actually would know, because I don't remember anything I said on it. The original version of this was not a girl on a bicycle. It was actually like a cowboy, and the landscape was more of a Western kind of a landscape, and they just dispensed with all that and just totally changed it, which is fine by me because that would have sounded like they were doing too much of a Dark Tower thing if they went that way anyway. So we follow him. We follow him like he goes to a beach and then through a door. Then which is actually looks like the doorway to a crypt, and that's when he sees himself as a child. And Reggie comes in, but he's lying there dead, and you see Reggie. I guess he's recording himself. He makes a reference to a cessation of life, experiment number 73, and that's where you're realizing that as a child, in this instance, he was dead for the past 12 hours and change. And when you say experiment number 73, well, how many times have they done this? We immediately see Klaus is at a rooftop party, and he sees a teen version of himself. He's joking about childhood trauma before he falls to a car-crushing splat below. And then after that, Klaus actually sees himself getting speared in the White Buffalo Suite. And by speared, I mean spear gun. I realize that could be misinterpreted by something, especially with someone like Klaus. Anyway.
So that flashback with the Reginald in the crypt with him as a little boy is a different part of a scene that we had seen in, I can't remember whether it's season 1 or season 2. You actually see Reginald put him in that crypt,
right?
To interact with like the dead. You don't see this part where he actually dies in that crypt. So It's an interesting like. Like I don't know whether it's a suppressed memory, but it's like an extended memory, and it like just adds to that story, which I think that's great storytelling. Like, oh, you may remember this story as being traumatic like this. It was even more traumatic because his father not only tortured him with ghostly spirits, he also allowed him to die in that.
Right.
It was much worse.
Yeah, absolutely, and it also makes for why that the relationship between those two was probably the most interesting of all of them, other than maybe the Vanya one. But then again, he was just drugging her, so whatever.
Yeah,
because she's scary strong.
Yeah, who doesn't have that story?
Yeah, the story of my life, kitty chloroform. So, meanwhile, we'll get back to Klaus momentarily. But meanwhile, Victor is insisting on getting the truth from Harlan, who flat out refuses, and this results in a little power showdown between the two of them. And the blast just knocks them both to either side of the room, and it's after that's when Harlan comes clean about everything. And again, we have another character who's obviously led a tragic life, because the truth is he was waiting for Vanya to return the whole time, and all the way up to the day his mother died. And it was at that moment he thought he felt Vanya out there. He sensed her. So with his abilities, which again I think are very. They're vaguely defined. That's why I was using a character like David from Legion, because David almost seemed like omnipotent at certain points, but this seems like something he would be able to do. He reaches out, he mentally reaches out, but then he realizes it's not Vanya, it's her mother. It's other women like her. But the problem is, once he's made this powerful connection, he was unable to sever it. And when he tried, he ended up pushing back. And it becomes like an overload, which is what results in killing all those women, and like that montage that we had discussed a few moments ago. And then we hear, apparently it wasn't just the 6 or 7 moms of these. It was 27 of them. That's a pretty big number. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where he's a character who's bathed in tragedy. I don't know how much long for this world this character will be. I will say right now, it's not much of a prediction, but it's like I don't see this character surviving this season. Maybe something will change. Maybe they'll do a Flashpoint thing, and maybe they'll go back and maybe she'll take her powers away from him or something. But right now, I think he's going to die. That's the way I see it. Now, Allison, on the other hand, she has a memory. We were talking about this because we were thinking about how she's always thinking back to things. But here she has kind of one of her sweeter memories, as opposed to things that happen at lunch counters and such, where we go back to 1964 and she's being consoled in bed by Raymond, who ends up singing Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come." It's so funny. For a hot minute there, I forgot it was Sam Cooke. I was like, wait, is that Marvin Gaye? Like, no, Marvin Gaye is "What's Going On." Sam Cooke is "What Change Is Gonna Come." Just because they're both great singers. It's not a race thing. Shut up. Anyway, we get canceled. So where else are we? Ben and Faye are still disagreeing about their plans moving forward. Oh, by the way, I love the petty bullshit between these two. That's the one thing that's kind of entertaining. There's that scene. I don't think it's this. I think it's the previous episode, maybe, when they're having the argument about who becomes number one now. They're like, wait, I'm number two, number three. Oh, baby, you're a screw up. I should skip over you.
Right. Or when they're talking to Reginald, then she like points to Ben and says like, "Oh, you're the plan guy," or like whatever she.
The idea guy.
The idea guy. Yeah, you're the idea guy. She puts him on the spot. Like, hey, you wanted this, buddy.
And it's interesting because even this is like the 5th episode, and my opinion of her has shifts as we go from episode to episode, because at least to her credit, she's way more concerned with that, cosmic ball of scary energy in the basement, and she believes that they do need to work with the Umbrella Academy than Ben, who's more hell-bent on vengeance and revenge and that kind of stuff. So, we'll give Raven Girl some credit there.
Yeah.
Even though it makes me think of Raven from DC. And anyway, so people start to converge in the lobby of the hotel. And I love that as each one encounters Luther, they all seem to be somewhat slightly bruised or cut or damaged. And he just assumes they're all from something that happened with Harlan, because the first one is Victor. So he just starts thinking the worst and worst thoughts about the whole situation. But we will also see and get the answer to what happened with that bar, because we will see that Allison and Diego did get into a big-ass brawl at the bar, because they both have marks on them from their bout of ultra-violence there. I know that Diego was into it, but I think he makes a reference about her being kind of... But it's in the midst of all this Five and Lila that appear. But before we can hear Five, explain what a Kugelblitz is to them, that's when we follow Diego, who catches up to his new son, Stan. And apparently in this hotel, hydrochloric acid is among the different cleaning supplies they have in their storeroom.
For the tough stains.
Yeah, because, club soda, chloroform, whatever. And that's when he finally takes him to, the White Buffalo scene, and we see that he discovers that Klaus is dead. And that's when we return to our journey with Klaus in this afterlife. And he encounters his mother seated at a table on a beach. I really love this scene. I love the way they speak to each other. And in this moment, even though we've encountered, so much tragedy with what's gone on with Allison and what we just found out about Harlan and so on and so forth, it's really hard, at least for me personally, not to have a great deal of sympathy for Klaus, because when he has this conversation with his mother, you feel so horrible for him, because he never got to have this in his life. Because it instantly seems like this woman understands him better than anybody living has in his existence. I love in this, and during the midst of this conversation, we get little bon mots dropped like, how have you died 56 times and come back to life? And we're like going, wait a minute, 56 times? But Reggie said experiment 73, so I guess all those experiments weren't death after all. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think he, like I was saying with some of his scenes with Reginald, I think he carries a lot of like the sweet emotion of the show, whether it's the interaction with the mother, whether it's his interactions with Reginald, in the previous seasons, as well as this one in his office, where they're, having some moments, he's sharing him how to hide pills and medication, and like, just kind of talking through things. Like, I don't know, there's something about him. He's sort of like beyond all the other characters. He also doesn't like he doesn't participate in a lot of the combat and stuff as much as the other characters. You know, he's just always kind of floating through existence. Right. And even like you said, the sweet conversation that he has with his nephew, you know, like he's the one that, for as weird and goofy and spacey and, you know, reckless as he is, he's sort of the emotional center of everything.
He's the heart of the show. It's the heart. You know, whenever you find a show, there's always that one character you can say, "Oh, that's the heart of the show." In this show, it's Klaus. It also says something about his constant state of obliviousness that he's had for pretty much most of his life, that he wouldn't have even realized that he's been dead 56 times already. The fact that he even articulates it, that I just thought I was like some sort of cartoon character who gets bonked on the head, and then moments later he's fine.
You see the birds around your head, yeah.
Tweeting birds. Anyway, but I love the different phrasings that his mom uses, like, you know, that you're not looking for vengeance, you're looking for purpose. That's a great insight into his character. And also the fact that you're running away from something that you're running away from the very thing that you're chasing. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And then when she follows that up, like, what he's looking for, it's been right in front of him all along. And I'm like, okay, I'm very intrigued now where we're going to go with this. So, and I like the idea that Klaus is at the center of this there's a new mystery here beyond the fact that, you know, only now is he realizing that he has this, he has an ability that it makes sense that Reggie would be so intrigued and interested in, because it kind of makes him the most powerful in some sense, because he's immortal. You're immortal then. You know, it's Wolverine, it's, what's the other one? No, it's Kamiko on The Boys. Actually, they all have that. He's got it too, apparently. So when we come back to, you know,
he's the only one that's connected with one of the mothers.
That's true. That's right.
You know, and that's the crux of this whole grandfather paradox is the mothers. Right. And we've seen their heads explode. We've like the mothers have become big characters this season. It seems to all sort of be rotating around Harlan and the mothers, and then I just got to think like something's going to come of that. Even in the first episode where they show that the little golden pixie dust goes into the woman before she gives birth on the train in Korea, which we hadn't seen in any of the previous birth scenes. And that the pixie dust is obviously been tied to Victor and Harlan, that is Victor somehow the mother of this whole thing? Is, you know, those are my questions, like, the resolution.
There's a thematic thing throughout the entire season dealing with mothers. From their own mothers to the loss of being a mother, to searching for one's mother, to I'll leap forward to a detail that we'll get to later on, but I'll say it now instead. When Klaus recognizes the tattoo, and what is the name of the biker club? I believe, isn't it the Mothers of Agony? So it's, you know. Oh, by the way, guys, way to be on the nose. Anyway, so. Yeah, it's definitely a major theme coursing throughout this season, and it's always been there to a certain extent, like with the Diego character, because of Grace being a mom, looked at as the mom. But then when it's brought up here, we have the character from the Sparrows, Jamie, before they killed her off, who thinks it's just some sort of weird kinky thing or something. There's something wrong with him because they don't view her that way. So anyway. 5, Lila. They apparently have successfully explained what the Kugel Blitz is, you know, the thing that's going to bring about the end of the universe. And at this point, several of them are suggesting that either the focus of their plan or one of the major working parts of their plan should be killing whomever, whatever it was that killed their mothers. Of course, Victor is trying to steer them away from that direction because she knows, I'll be Harlan upstairs, and she's kind of like, kind of feel like it's kind of on me a little bit. You know, it's a little bit of me, but we'll get there. But first we have to have something silly happen, which made me smile probably the most in this episode. When Stan and Diego have decided they're going to get rid of Klaus's body. Klaus has not returned from the dead. So they've wrapped him up in the carpet, and they run into the guy from the hotel dude. And he's like, we're playing a game. Like, what? And I love that the guy is just very deadpan, like, what's the name of the game? Like, guy in a carpet. And his only answer is, hope you win.
Yeah.
I was like, I love the simplicity of it. It's so funny. But of course, on the elevator, that's when Klaus comes back from the dead. Now, this is what I was saying earlier when we talked about how it's almost a shame for all these characters that they have these major life-changing events and discoveries or whatever. And each one is pretty much overshadowed by oh yeah, that's nice, but the universe is about to end. The Victor situation, the Vanya to Victor situation, which probably is actually given more space than the others, and as well as it should. And I mentioned, Diego finding out, hey, apparently I'm a dad. And here, maybe it's not the same kind of thing, but I think there would be under normal I don't know if they ever experienced normal circumstances, but if not for the whole end of the universe thing, the fact is there would be a major reaction that Klaus has discovered that he's got this new power, or a power he never knew he had, which kind of, like I said, makes him immortal. Mm-hmm. That's because one thing, because before it was like he can talk to the dead, because he kind of thought, did anyone even really believe that he could do that or take it very seriously? Until, I guess, late in the run where maybe they started to see Ben out finally. But for a while there, I don't think anyone was taking Klaus seriously. I don't think they believed he could do anything, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. At least that was the way I always interpreted it. Mm-hmm. So, but I love that because there are several points, especially in this episode, where you realize Klaus is the one who's kind of ahead of all you people. He's the one who mentioned the ball of energy. He didn't take him seriously. He's the one who recognized the tattoo. He's, yay, Klaus. Back in that basement with the ball of energy. So it's Ben and Faye and Grace are there, and it's a little bit of a disturbing moment here. So they want to they want to grab a peek of what's going on inside this. Well, they don't know it's called the Kugelblitz yet, but we knew. So the idea that they have is, well, because she's a robot, I guess. So they basically yank out one of Grace's eyes, and while it's still tethered to her, and they essentially kind of try to slip it inside the big Kugelblitz thing here, which of course, once again, causes a major, Kugel wave to happen. And when we see that wave retract, it wipes out, it looks like it kind of wipes out all the other hotel guests that aren't, members of the Umbrella Academy. So, yeah. And that's at that point, I think they ask, hey, so how much longer we got to go? I love how 5 is able to estimate, we've probably got like 4 or 5 days. And part of me is like going, I'm sorry.
How did he do that math?
How would you know that? I didn't. And then I realized, then part of me was thinking, wait, when he goes with Klaus to the Amish, and he has that little epiphany, and we see him working out all the math, and he's writing like on the windows of the car. Right. Are we trying to say that's connected to his revelation here, even though he hadn't known it was a Kugelblitz at that point in time? I mean, I'll let it go. It's fine. It's shorthand. We don't need a big explanation why he knows that. But in a way, it was like, is he Mr. Spock? How does he know this?
He's done that like sort of scribbly sort of thing in the previous seasons too.
Yeah,
it's just kind of a shorthand for
It's like
he's
it's like
super smart.
Look how smart, and I figured something out here. Carry the 2, whatever. Yeah. So. So over at at the academy, basically we're getting more confirmation that Ben's a real dickhead, and even more so that when Faye and the cube that we call Chris surmise there is some form of a black hole collapsing in on itself and they need help, he's the one who's kind of being a douche about it. I even got briefly, as long as it took me to stop the episode and go back to the previous episode and check something, I got briefly confused when Ben referred to Harlan by name. Because initially I was going, wait, they never told him the old guy's name. And then I went back to the other, was like, oh wait, they said Harlan in front of Sloane a bunch of times. Sloane we didn't see it, but maybe Sloane referred to the guy as Harlan off screen to them, and that's why he would know. It's like, okay, I'm okay with that. I'll buy it. I'll buy it. Because originally I was like, wait a minute, did I just catch a mistake? I'm like, nah, it's not really a mistake. It's fine. But speaking of, I mentioned Klaus. Klaus does finally drop the fact about the Kugelblitz that he saw in the basement, and everyone gets all upset. It's like, no, I told you. It's like, but then he goes,
I just thought you were crazy.
Yeah, everything you say.
I never listen to anything you say.
But the really important thing here, and I think it's probably one of the real scenes of the entire episode, and it almost goes to what we were having the conversation about what qualifies someone to be the number one and so on, is we get the scene between Victor and the family. And it's about Harlan and about having to give up Harlan. And in this scene, Victor is doing everything that he can to save Harlan, not to sacrifice him to the Sparrows, but no one else there understands why. I mean, Lila makes the point that, you were talking about saving one person versus billions of people. How is there even a debate? Now, I will say, and then that is also, and we're also going to get to where the title of the episode actually comes from as well. Now, I can't help but, we all embrace our geeky side here on the STBD podcast. I was getting a little Star Trek feeling here. I was getting a little bit of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and
of course,
that's the kind of a feeling here. And there's not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's what I thought was really interesting. And I didn't make a note of it? I guess I'll just use it. Good thing I remember it. The character who, although it's not like he hasn't had any moments, that would be a lie. But the character who tends to be the least empathetic of the Academy members, of the family, let's say, would be Five. Mm-hmm. But he's the one who says the thing which I thought really, no coincidence of word unintended. It cuts the deepest, but it's also, maybe in a way it is the kindest as well, when he says, we're down to ethical triage here.
I know. I love that ethical triage. I thought that was great line.
You can't save everyone, and the kindest cut wins. Mm-hmm. It's such a nice piece of writing, and it really just brings it all together there. And there's nothing Victor can say to that. I mean, then there's the realization. I love what she calls Lila Little Britain and stuff like that. But it's like, it cuts through everything and it's like, yeah, this is what you have to do. And to me, I thought that's just, I love this scene because I thought that you got to see some really nice dramatic chops played by several actors. The guy who plays Luther, I think, does a really great job in this scene. What I just said with the actor playing Five. And of course, I already know that given the right material, either when it was Ellen Page or now that it's Elliot Page, either way, acting is what they do, and what they do well when you give them the right material. And I thought that this scene is. Oh, by the way, can I also point out something they do with the way they angle the camera constantly, especially during this scene, the way they take that very downward view of Victor, so she seems even smaller. It's almost like talking to a child, because they're the ones who seem to understand what needs to be done. And this is something she's kind of keeping in mind that up until a few weeks ago, she was kind of on the fringe of this family to begin with because she was the one who they thought didn't have powers. And now she's kind of pushed and been pushed to the forefront where she might be the most powerful one of all of them, but she still has a lot to learn. And this is what, when we were talking earlier about who would be the number one on the team, this is one of those lessons that you have to learn. I think Luther even makes some sort of reference to that. Like, it's decisions like this. It's the hard decisions that would come with the territory of doing this. I think it's one of the best dramatic scenes in the show.
Yeah.
Of the season so far, at least.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's great.
So, and I also, I think you might have mentioned it or were making. I don't know if you were making a reference to it or not when you were talking about the sparkly, glittery stuff. The earlier scene I failed to mention, but it struck my eye as being really visually interesting. Earlier, when Victor and Harlan are in that room, and there's a constant snowfall happening in the room.
Yeah.
So therefore it takes on like a snow globe kind of feel and look to it. And I like that idea of doing that because, I think there's a connotation, especially those of us, who are older, because we think maybe we go all the way back to Citizen Kane. But there's something about having us looking at life like as though it's a snow globe. There's that brief moment of perfection or beauty that's caught there, but you know that it's fragile and it's not real. And you know that there are a lot. Harlan's life outside of and what it's led up to is pretty shitty. I just really there's something that was really kind of beautiful about that, and I just meant to make sure I mentioned it. So, I did. There you go.
Yeah.
And also because when Victor goes back to the room, it's not snowing anymore. So I just
yeah, it's kind of. I mean, I think that's a good interpretation because I did notice that, and I was trying to figure out exactly what that was and what the purpose was.
I think snow globes often have. There's something about a snow globe that has a connotation of it's nostalgia, it's memory. And it's something of a previous life. That's why when I got like Citizen Kane with Rosebud, where it has that snow globe kind of effect, all the way to this. I thought it was like a nice visual way to kind of to tell us something that it almost had a very made me think of it's almost like a very Japanese art film kind of idea. I think Japanese. I hope I got the right. Asian communities film there. Anyway, I'm rambling. It's late. But they're remembering home, and they're remembering what it would have been like if Vanya had actually stayed and what could have happened. And then there's that but there's still time. Now, of course, we don't know what that means, what that might entail, what it is that they can actually do here. But we'll get to that, or maybe we won't. I don't know, because then we're going to switch over to the White Buffalo suite. We get some nice family stuff. Then we get some nice flirty stuff. And then it's basically a prelude to some fucking stuff. And no one seems to notice that when they yanked the spear out of the wall, a little hidden door kind of cracked open. And a little bit later, in a episode-ending montage, we see there's some weird cosmic-y light thing going on behind that door. So I'm very curious about what's going on there. I don't know if they reveal it in the next episode. Someone else knows.
Maybe.
Ruined. And that takes us to the darkest scene of the first 5 episodes. Yeah. Darker than killing off the sparrows and all that. Who cares? We didn't even know them. It's the scene between Allison and Luther.
Oh, so weird.
And it's a scene that it starts out poignant and sad. Because we remember now, if we go all the way back to season 1, how once upon a time Luther and Allison had this very strong bond between them. Luther obviously had a crush on her all that time.
Sure.
Back when. And he consents. He finally has a moment alone to talk to her. He's finally, he's not being distracted by this thing or that thing, or either be cosmic calamities or, the fact he's finally getting laid or whatever it might be. He sees there's something going on with her, and that's where she loses, she drops a line like, I can't keep losing people, because that's what's happening to her through all these calamities, like we said before. And you have this scene, it starts off, it's kind of sweet, and there's a little bit of humor, and it's poignant, and then it turns awkward when they embrace, and then all of a sudden we're remembering what I just mentioned from going back to season 1. But now Allison is actually being the potential aggressor here. But he's trying to back away from that idea because,
he's with Sloane.
He's got Sloane, and maybe he's actually going to be viewing her as the sister that that the way he should have been in the first place. But, if they could do it on the Flash show, I guess it doesn't really matter. Anyway, and it goes from so we go from sweet to awkward, and then to dark. Because when he drops the thing where he's gonna go see Sloane, and she gets really angry that he's leaving her. She knows that he's had this long-standing feelings and affection and crush on her, and someone he just met 5 minutes ago, who she doesn't herself even actually trust to begin with. That's who you're going to leave her for, and then you realize where this conversation is going, and he realizes it too, and he basically, and I believe he even says don't, and then she rumors him to stay. Which is not good. And then she rumors him further. And look, Allison does stop at herself at a certain point by screaming stop, but up until that point, this is pretty much the equivalent of rape. It's rape, at least for a hot minute there, that's rape. It's rape that gets cut off, it doesn't happen. But it's rape. It's interesting. It's rape in reverse, but it's still it's rape.
Yeah, it's weird because it tips a couple ways. It starts with her forcing him to what did she say? Like, I heard a rumor that you wanted me or something like that, and then so she gets that power. Mm-hmm. But then, like any wish that you make or something like that, you have to be very careful about how you make the wish, because he gets super aggressive in it too. And it turns around from her controlling him in a rape kind of way to him, and it takes place on a pool table too, which is also very loaded, from cinema and television and so on. And then it turns around and she loses control of the rumor, and he gets very aggressive with her, and then she stops it. So it's a very weird, I can't say that it doesn't fit in the show, but again, I go back to, I just need to see where Allison goes. Why did they really did you need that?
See, okay now. I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
No, I didn't see the very next episodes. I don't know what happened in the next episodes. I'm only surmising where I would think this is going for the final 5. In the first season, at a certain point, for however you want to read it, Vanya eventually becomes the villain of season 1. And I think that's what they're doing with Allison. That's the way it feels to me. We're taking her on an exceedingly darker journey. She's getting more and more aggressive. She's doing things that are not good. We've seen that she can't seem to stop herself. She can't seem to. I mean, yes, she stops this, but it's a little bit. It's a little. What's the phrase? It's a little late now, because you've already. You already know what you did. How are you gonna look this person in the eye again? Quite frankly, or anything else for that matter. And considering what her abilities are, that's the feeling I'm getting from it. I could be wrong. And then when she runs into Victor, when they're trying to sneak Harlan out of the hotel, at that point, again, this is the last episode I saw, so I could be proven. Everyone might know I'm wrong already. But at this point, she's saying she seems like she's being convinced by Victor to help. She's going to help get Harlan somewhere safe, and Victor will meet up with them later. But my feeling when I'm watching this moment, based on everything I've just seen about her, I don't feel I would believe her, and I don't think they can do anything to redeem the character that quickly. So that's why, in my opinion, again, we'll find out next week when we resume the second podcast, which will probably go on for 10 hours. Whether her dark journey is going to keep going on the way it seems to be. Right now, it seems like it's just picking up steam, and it's getting worse from episode to episode because of what she does here. And it's interesting because while that's going on and she's out of it, when Victor goes to tell everybody what she did, everybody's so disappointed in Victor. And I'm watching, it's like, oh, are you guys paying attention to what Allison's doing? If you're just,
Right.
Because at least Victor's heart is in the right place, and I understand what they're doing. I think I'm intrigued, but to see how far they'll go with it. But they did in this episode. I was like, okay, they went pretty far, but they stopped it. I was almost surprised that they did, but I understood why they did, because it was about like you were saying about control. And the problem is when you're doing that with someone who's basically a human gorilla. Guess what? He's going to be kind of aggressive at certain things, and you might not be in control of the situation anymore.
Right.
So it made a lot of sense to me. I thought.
I think you bring up an interesting thing, like in terms of where this goes. And again, like you said, we'll figure this out in a week. But it seems like it's coming down to a showdown to the two characters right now who have lost the most. Mm-hmm. Harlan, one, feels very responsible for killing all these other women, and he's lost his mother, through his powers and so on. And Allison has lost a lot through her powers and her experience. And so he doesn't really have anything to blame her for, but she seems to now have a lot to blame him for.
She doesn't know yet. She hasn't revealed. She I don't think.
Oh yeah, she doesn't. Yeah,
she hasn't. I feel that revelation is coming.
She doesn't know.
That revelation is coming, and that's what would make her turn against him. Yeah. Because if he doesn't, it's the grandfather paradox, whatever. If he doesn't do what he did, then so on and so on and so on and so on.
Right. Right.
Then she would have Claire, and so on. You can trace it back to that, I would say.
Sure.
My stomach's making all these weird noises. It's like, it's late, hurry up. So, what else do we have here? There's a few other things just to wrap up here. Klaus and Five share a drink. And one of the things I've been kind of enjoying about these two, because you don't get more polar opposite than these two, but I like the fact that they've been bonding more in this season than we've ever seen before. Even though in this scene, I do love the fact that they are both continuing to talk over each other while not really focusing on what either person is saying. But this is the scene where Five, when he pulls out the little swath of skin, and Klaus recognizes the tattoo, and he says, "Oh, it's that biker gang from the Mothers of Agony from like 2 timelines ago." And I went, "Oh, Mothers of Agony." Okay, all right. And of course, and then as the episode ends, we get a little brief montage of different things. We get Luther meeting up with Sloane. We get what I mentioned before about what's going on behind that door. And then we have Five showing up, and apparently they're not just a biker gang. The name of the bar is named Mothers of Agony because because in Sons of Anarchy the bar was named Sons of Anarchy. No, it wasn't. It's stupid. Anyway. But he goes through the bar. I love all the murmurs like, "Hey, kid, you're in the wrong spot." Oh, I do like the fact he's not wearing short pants at least this season. Good for him. He can wear pants now.
Right. He's grown up a little bit.
Put on his big boy pants. But he enters a room that's marked members only, and that's the last thing we see in the episode is there's someone getting a tattoo, but we don't care about that. We care about who the tattoo artist is. It's Pogo. Pogo, the whatever form of, is he a chimp? He's a chimpanzee, right?
He's a chimp from the space program, yeah.
Right, there you go. And that is the end of the episode. All I know about the next episode, I know in the first 3 seconds, I think I see Pogo. So it's like, there's a monkey. Okay, I gotta stop. So, like I said, we will be talking about the rest of the season next week. If we have any other additional thoughts about this season, we'll plug them in then, because we have already blown by the 2-hour mark, so I don't want to go any further. Because, Kimber, you're one of the 2 listeners I know appreciates the long podcast, so I don't think you're going to be listening back to yourself, so maybe you will. Anyway, I think we did a great job. So if you enjoyed this podcast, guess what? You enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Like the page, and you can join the conversation about shows like The Umbrella Academy or the upcoming Better Call Saul or The Boys that everyone except Kimber seems to like or whatever. Now, you already are listening to our podcast, so I don't really need to tell you where to find it, but maybe if you want to tell somebody else where to find it, they can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much everywhere where podcasts are made available, except Pandora. I don't want to call them Pandora. But better still, you can go to stvdpodcast.podbean.com, where you can find all, 350 of our podcasts, which represent, I think, 1,000 hours. Do the math. Please follow us on Instagram. Our handle there is Serious TV Drama, all is one word. And you can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. That's STVD as in Serious TV Drama. Now, a little bit of business at the end here. The next STVD podcast will be number 351, in which Jamie and I will be talking about the penultimate episode of The Boys Season 3. Later next week, as I said, Kimber, you will be joining me once again to talk about the final 5 episodes of Umbrella Academy Season 3. After that, as I have already posted on the Facebook page, so, by the way, I already told you, follow us on Facebook. Why wouldn't you? Jamie and I are going to wrap up the final episode of The Boys. A couple days after that, Better Call Saul returns. And we'll be covering that, of course. It's our favorite show here. And I think sometime around mid-July, the 14th, the 15th, around that time, Brian and I will be talking about the final 2 mega-sized episodes of Stranger Things Season 4, which will be showing up on Netflix over the course of this holiday weekend. All this means we will have plenty to be talking about over the next few weeks and lots to watch as well. Geez, July. But Better Call Saul coming back in mid-July. What We Do in the Shadows comes back a day later. And I just found out Harley Quinn is coming back at the end of the month. It's a great show, guys. It's not a silly cartoon, trust me. There's probably a million shows I don't know. So whatever. All I know is that it's time to end this podcast. Kimber, thank you so much for being patient and rejoining us. It's been a while.
Thank you. I'll see you in a week. I look forward to doing the other half. It'll be shorter because we made so many broad points about the Umbrella Academy. It'll be a swift, hour and a half.
Right. You know, every time anyone, it's usually me, when we go out of our way to say it's something, our podcast is going to be a certain amount of time, and leaning towards the shorter, it's always longer. We'll see what happens. I don't feel bad about it. We talked about 5 episodes of television. Who cares?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And good television.
Yeah, damn straight.
Good original IP. Well, it's adapted from a comic book, so not totally original IP, but as opposed to.
All right. With all that said, good night, Kimber, and good night, everybody out there, and we'll see you next week.
All right, good night.